one of the very first things I often do is it sounds so weird. And when my wife happens to look over at me, she's like aghast at this, but I would just smile.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter what I had been dreaming or what I was thinking, I'll smile for a minute or two. And so your brain apparently doesn't really know the difference between a smile that is induced by your already state of happiness and the other way around. So it starts triggering off, okay, happiness. So that's one thing I do.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So smiling triggers oxytocin, and oxytocin is one of the happiness hormones. So
Right. So
yep.
you need the objectivity. That's one of the reasons why you need friends, if not therapists. It's just to kind of straighten out your view.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I say to a lot of my friends that I crowdsource my psychotherapy. And I just,
Yeah, it's cheaper.
Write them a letter and get everything out on the page of get all that negativity out of your head onto a page. And then you know what? Light that page on fire. And just burn it away, and
That's a good idea.
Just purge yourself. Use an exercise to purge yourself of that negativity, because otherwise it's just going to eat you up inside, and it's not going to be healthy. So.
You're taking the poison that you wish they had taken. Really, you're only poisoning yourself, right? So why go there either way?
Exactly. Yeah.
So interesting. Like running, or I've got to do this task. I'm just going to do it for 1 minute.
Yes.
Some very short, that's all I'm going to do. But more often than not, so that makes it very non-daunting, is the science term. And then I found this actually works. It's like you're just doing it for a minute, and then you're like, okay, I'm into it now. You just keep going. You'll probably do it more than that minute.
Yeah.
Well, and then you develop a habit. But getting over that hump is very, very important.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us for another edition of High Octane Friends podcast. It's myself, Trevor, and Rob, and we are going to be talking this week about happiness. So, and I think we're still debating, all of the various aspects, because there's so much stuff you could talk about there. But, in general, the idea is what makes you happy? What makes what makes each of us happy? Are there different hacks that we can talk about from our own personal experiences that we've used through our lifetimes, or from what we've learned, or various aspects like that? And so anything you want to add, Rob?
Yeah.
You're again.
I'm sorry. Yes, I tend to go out of the frame. We're having some technical challenges, audience. So pardon me. I had my cat in the frame earlier, and maybe that's why it's also like that. Happiness is a goal that was for me an answer to the question directly put to me in person by a billionaire about, well, that would have been back in 2016, I think, 2015. And said, what is your goal? What's the most important thing? And he wanted me to say something about, because he wanted me to say something about helping make him money through money, because anyway, we're sharing as a partner. And he didn't like my answer, because my answer was happiness. The question was like, what's the most important thing to you? And as you may expect, a self-made billionaire, I won't mention this person's name, you might think that they would err on the side of wanting to really make so much money. Like, this is a person that has had a couple of yachts. One was worth, I remember at the time, 85 million euros. I think he paid for it. And then he bought another one, and I think it was 250 million. US dollars, and promptly sold it. So, obviously it wasn't making you happy. And I think it is a valid thing. It's not the only thing. And money, of course, is part of your happiness. You need to be able to survive. I came back from a walk this morning, a very interesting group here in Toronto that went out to a park called Downsview Park. And I had no idea, because it used to be a military airport. And I didn't realize that this park was outside of that so grand. And the fellow who was giving the walk doing the talking a lot about nature. I like to walk. I walk a couple of times a day whenever I can. And increasingly, I'm going to these parks and doing more exploring. And it was so interesting hearing about talks about the plants and stuff. And it made me realize again, it's like, as long as we all, I think, like money, but some of us become too avaricistic, too greedy, and we forget what's really important. And I think happiness is a very, very valid goal in life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Not just if you're in the depths of depression, just to get back to quote unquote normalcy. I think about my mother who's now in her late 90s. And actually, I remember, do you remember this, Trevor? I think it was last year. I happened to be on the phone to you. You may not remember this. I called you, and I remember I went out on the back porch there in her garden. She's in South Surrey, which is at White Rock, so just south of a suburb of Vancouver. And I remember as I was talking with you, and I said, look, I'm just looking in amazement on my mother, who I think at the time was 96, lives by herself, largely independent. And she's out vigorously, like, like doing stuff in the garden. And I'm like, wow. And I often say to my son, like, call your grandmother, you're not feeling well, because she's the happiest person I know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We don't have all the answers, but we're going to talk about some of the things that make us happy. I think because happiness is so much tied to our brain and our neurological system in general.
Yeah.
It behooves us to look at what are the things that make us happy in our brain, from our brain. So some of that is attitudinal. Like if you tell yourself you're happy, and you look for things that make you happy. And you even talk to people, even by virtue of you being on this podcast today and listening to us, audience, like, I hope that you get at least one thing that you will try out to make you happy. Here's one of them.
Rob, I would be really happy if you were like,
if I moved
there.
Over.
Yes.
So maybe I just move over this way. I'll drift. I may drift. I'm in my car drifting. One of the things that does seem to have an effect on me and boosts my happiness is something I thought of some years ago, and that it was just kind of on a whim. I thought, I wonder if this is the case. It was a hypothesis of sorts. It was very scientific, and then I found out indeed there is research to suggest this is true. As many of you know, areas around your mouth are amongst, if not the most innervated regions of your body. And so there's lots of nerves in there, and of course it's in your head, on your head. And it links to your brain, not quite directly, but pretty closely. And so I thought, I wonder if, because people often mix up what is the order of operations? What's the cause and effect? You're happy, and therefore you smile.
Yeah.
You smile, and therefore you're happy.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I wonder if it goes both ways to some extent. And so it turns out it does.
Yep.
Well, from what I researched, and then you need to get into a habit. Often, happiness is a habit,
right.
Doing certain habits. And so, when I remembered to do this, I got into as I'm talking about this, I'm going to do it again more. When I wake up in the morning, one of the very first things I often do is it sounds so weird, and when my wife happens to look over at me, she's like aghast at this, but I would just smile. Mm-hmm. And no matter what I had been dreaming or what I was thinking, I'll smile for a minute or two. And so your brain apparently doesn't really know the difference between a smile that is induced by your already state of happiness and the other way around. So it starts triggering off, okay, happiness. So that's one thing I do.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So smiling triggers oxytocin, and oxytocin is one of the happiness hormones. So I was going to say there's actually a bunch. And so not that, so again, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I've sort of been
You play one on TV.
Yeah, I play one on TV, exactly. Well, I've been, so I have struggled with depression and anxiety for many, many years. And, been getting professional help all the way back to grad school. Started in grad school with procrastination, and struggling with procrastination. I would sit down to do the work. I couldn't do it. I'd be doing other things, and so I actually went to MIT. MIT Medical had this had a great sort of mental health system there, and spoke to somebody and got referred to a psychiatrist. And I mean, thank goodness, because I was going through a lot at the time, both personally and professionally, and it really helped me to kind of get through that sort of tough period of my life. And and the first thing I think my psychiatrist said to me is like, well, 1 in 3 MIT students are on some form of are using some form of mental health.
Is that right?
Whether it's and that's actually fairly common, for these. I mean, you can imagine, high stress environment, but also in general, sort of is the case that more and more people kind of need support and need help, and this goes back to kind of one of the things we hear about a lot in the literature is, well, one thing, you can hear the word imposter syndrome, and when I was trying to explain to Rob what imposter syndrome was, it's sort of like, I was like, well, it's the opposite of Dunning-Kruger. So if everyone has heard the Dunning-Kruger effect, it's basically these two social scientists figured out that, in general, or did a study where they showed that in general, people that know less about a topic have more confidence when they're talking about that topic than people that are experts. And so there's this there's this curve of like expertise where confidence versus confidence versus expertise, right? And there's the peak of Mount Stupid is Dunning-Kruger, and that's where that's where you might hear someone talking about something that they purport to be an expert on, but they really don't know as much as an expert. But the expert knows less. I think there's this famous quote by Bertrand Russell saying the problem with and I'm going to butcher it, but the problem with life today is that the stupid are so cocksure, and the wise are riddled with doubt and anxiety. And
isn't it so interesting? I mean, Bertrand Russell, like when was that? But we're going through that very much now, even more so, I would suggest.
Oh yeah, no, it's only been amplified by social media as well, and all of the other things that sort of reward people that are loud and have authoritative statements over people that have a more nuanced view on things.
Yes.
And that's absolutely a topic for another podcast entirely, probably.
Yeah, we'll have to elaborate.
But to get back to imposter syndrome, Dunning-Kruger talks about kind of false confidence, and then imposter syndrome is false insecurity. It's those people, once they know enough about a topic to know all of the things that they don't know, they can feel insecure. Like, I mean, I've been coding for 20 years, and I still feel insecure when I go to code, that I'm like, well, I don't really know as much as, let's say, a professional coder, but I know enough to get by, and I know enough to kind of do the work that I need to do. But I don't see all of that accumulated expertise. All I see is the glaring holes where it's like, oh, I don't remember how these brackets are supposed to be formatted or something, So I think, that's very much, and people with imposter syndrome, then that can feed into itself, and that leads to procrastination, that leads to all sorts of other issues. And, and it gets back to kind of like the, kind of almost hacking the reward system in your brain, right? So, figuring out the right combination of either, I think one of the things we talked about was cognitive behavioral therapy, which is kind of like...
I just wrote it down. Yeah.
There we go. Fantastic. Yeah. And so that's, long story short, there's a whole field of CBT that you can certainly dive into, but my shorthand for it is, it's sort of like you're realizing that you look out on the world with a certain mindset, and that, that mindset has in it sort of these automatic thoughts that feed back to you, so that can influence your view in one way or another, and so I've been very successful in research And one of the reasons I was that I had the right combination of certain, like some obsessive compulsive, and some like, like worry, anxiety about, experiments failing, where that turned into this sort of worst case disaster scenario generator in my head. When I'm walking around, I'm like, well, I got to make sure that system is ready so that if I come over there, I can use it. So it's useful for planning experiments. It's not useful for living your life. To always be thinking about the worst case scenario that can happen. So yeah.
And they taught you all. I was very fascinated by what you said about the 1 and 3. And you experience a lot of that when you're at MIT. And by the way, for those who don't know, that's MIT. Of course, that's the Mayberry Institute of Technology, right?
Yes.
Which leads me into my next point, which is a really important thing about being happy is comedy, humor. That's a great way. Like, find it. I highly suggest, and Trevor will definitely have something to say about this because he's an amateur stand-up comedian as well, but I highly suggest you find your favorite comedian or two, or show.
Yes.
And just
and
like
there's so many now that you can get one that
it's wonderful.
I mean,
Like,
Don McMullan is this great like engineer comedian, and all he does is like PowerPoints, and they're hilarious.
Oh, who is that? What's the name again?
Don McMullan. Yeah.
Don. Oh, geez.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Oh wow, maybe he's a distant relative of mine.
Oh yeah, it might be.
Well, like you and me, he's got obviously some Irish heritage in there. So yeah. The Irish send out the gift of the gab. And actually, back to my mother, who's the happiest person I know. Mm-hmm. She's right from Dublin. My dad's family was from the north, and somehow I don't know how they made it work. A Protestant from the north and a Catholic from the south. Growing up in that family, you learn to navigate a few things. But my mother was definitely the happier one in that equation. And I think a lot of that is about friendship. It's about being independent. It's gaining a sense of confidence.
Yes.
It's, I've not known my mother to exercise, but I mean, she does gardening and walks the dog and stuff like that. But people love my mother, and people like that, they have lots of friends. She had a friend that just died. I swear, audience, I'm not making this up. This person must have been one of the oldest people in Canada, if not the world. She just died last year. Her good friend was 112. One of her best friends now is 101. And so, and this woman who's 101, even more than my mother, still drives. She's like, oh, I'm going to come over and, I'm going to drive over. And my mom's like, I'm not driving with her. I'm not driving with you. But, so there's this kind of power there, this independence. I think happiness comes from that. And if you're afraid to do stuff, you know what? As I said to somebody years ago, run toward those things that scare you and that are difficult. And they came back to me years later and said, they're from Brazil, and they said, I remember you said that to me, and they sent me an email, and I wanted to thank you. I was like, oh, wow, I actually said something valuable. So I think, do stuff that's difficult. It'll make you feel a sense of accomplishment. If you're having troubles, of course, go see a therapist. I mean, I've gone through that years ago. There was a time when I first went, I lived in Tokyo for about 5 years, and, coming from a suburb of Toronto, Oakville, and kind of living that rather cloistered life, and then just having a bit of a love affair with the Orient since I was a little boy, but then still just kind of going there, it's a big shock and culture shock. And so the stress of that, combined with me having broken up with my longtime girlfriend, and then all of a sudden I'm in a land where you literally stand out. I'm 6'1", fair. And, you kind of have all these fast, fair weather friends. I came to realize is what they were. They weren't substantial. You want to have friends, but just like having hangers on. And I used to sing in a band in Tokyo. It's like you kind of realize this, and this kind of really stressed me out. And my hair started falling out, which stressed me out more. And then my hair started coming literally in clumps. And, for a young man, that's a big deal. So your hair's falling out. So CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, I remember having to go see a therapist, and that's what they did. And they just change your thinking. Like somewhere along the line, you get, off the right path of your way of perceiving the world, right? So
Yep.
you need that objectivity. That's one of the reasons why you need friends, if not therapists. It's just to kind of straighten out your view.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I say to a lot of my friends that I crowdsource my psychotherapy. And I just,
Yeah, it's
you know,
cheaper.
but you have to be careful with that too, you know, because I think I've actually
Right.
burnt a few out by like, oh, you know, like, and it was, I mean, in my defense, it was over COVID times and like things were pretty stressful. But yeah, like you want to. There's a fine balance between like using your friends as sort of just a bitch session to get like stuff off your head,
Right.
and also kind of like just having interesting, productive conversations, you know,
Mhm.
and I think, but I think it is useful to at least, and I've always noticed that every time I am feeling super down, um, if I just pick up the phone and have even just a simple conversation with somebody, I feel better afterwards, you know, because you kind of get yourself out of your own head, and that's particularly for, you know, like me in particular, in that I tend to be kind of a bit obsessive about things, or I'll be stuck on this problem and like, you know, can't let it go. But taking a walk, taking a chance, going outside, you know, these sorts of things can certainly help. And then there's another thing you mentioned there, um, uh, just about kind of as you get older, you know, your priorities change, and I think many people. Well, I mean, like the question many people get asked on their deathbed, like, "What do you regret most?" And none of them say, like, "I wish I had more money," right? It's always, "I wish I spent more time with my family during this time period. I wish I, you know, did this, did that," and it usually involves friends um, uh, and 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 at the same time, making friends gets harder and harder as you get out of school. So, you know, making an effort to go to that networking event, go to put yourself, well, as you said, put yourself in situations outside of your comfort zone. If you're an introvert, you know, I think it's useful to exercise that muscle and you know, try to meet people. And I mean, nowadays it's so easy to do online that you can absolutely find your tribe of people that are, you know, obsessed about Pokemon cards or whatever it is, and meet up. You know, I have a friend who runs is a moderator on a board game board, and that's his job. Is he works for the board gaming company, and helps to, you know, helps with sort of discussions and content and that kind of stuff. And you know, that's one of my family's things that we do is board games, because it gets everybody off the screen. And I think we need to start reinstituting it, actually, is like, you know,
Yeah.
screen free Saturday. And so it's just like, hey kids,
Yeah.
no screens, internet's unplugged. So, you know, like we got a bunch of board games we can play. You can have friends over to play with them. We can go outside. We can do things that don't revolve around screen time, because I think
Mhm.
that's actually another point, is that um, is that sometimes it's not enough to just have online friends, and especially as we're going
No, no, not at
more and
all.
more digital, you know, and I mean that's something we've also noticed. I mean, so we've been a part of a very popular sort of networking event that kicked off shortly after COVID, and people, and like it's been fantastic. And one of the reasons is people like to network in person, you know. Like there were these interesting things that popped up over COVID, of like lunch club, where you could have like virtual meetings with somebody, and those were great because again it fulfilled that social bucket. But meeting in person really was missing. And you know, I remember being in a job and meeting people for the first time, and they didn't realize that, yeah, it's the same thing. I was 6 foot tall, because all I was to them was a floating head on a Zoom screen. So
Right. You mentioned lunch club, that's a good one, to
mhm.
meet people. But the way in which I use it ultimately is if they're in my city. I have met some interesting people virtually all around the world, but if they're in Toronto, which is where we are, I make an effort to invite them, if it's a good conversation, to meet in person.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I just got a message before we got on here, and someone was responding to something on LinkedIn to me. And it's like, hey, your next event for High Octane Friends, make sure I'm there. And so I had met him on Lunch Club. But I wanted to comment on something you said about, you know, kind of going off the internet and electronica of all sorts, if you will, the internet, your phones on weekends. An episode I had with in our household just on Saturday. That's what happened. So my son, I don't want to throw my son under the bus here. He's a good kid, but you know, he was being a little surly. Let's say that. And so, okay, that's it. Now he's 20. He's not a kid anymore, right? But he's a young adult. I'm like, that's it. You know, you're living in our house. You can't talk to us that way. We're taking your phone away until at least dinner time, assuming you can behave. And so I took it away from him physically. He was not happy.
Yeah.
I physically took it away from him, hid it away. And in doing that, it forced him to do things differently. And, you know, and so we have an electric guitar. And so he went and he got the electric guitar out, and he was like, he spent the entire afternoon learning how to play new riffs and like researching it. Like, that's a much better use of your time.
Yeah.
And so like he was
hobbies,
happy.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. Hobbies, you know, and so I think I'm again, you know, not to beat the dead horse of I'm obsessive, but like I will, I guess maybe the right word might be highly conscientious, right? And I think we talked about conscientiousness before, although I'm not always that highly conscientious, but call it what you will. I tend to always, or I am high in worry, right? So I'll be worrying about, there's this thing that I need to finish, and in doing so, I sort of it crowds out all of the other time, and I don't give myself time to do hobbies. And one of the things I've tried to sort of make a habit is at least exercise, right? Run. I need to run a couple kilometers a couple times a week on a regular basis, because there's absolutely evidence that, you know, exercise does help to make you happier. You know, it makes you feel better. It gives you, again, time away from the screen, time away from anything else, just to where sometimes a lot of your you know, good ideas. I mean, the reason good ideas happen in the shower is because you're not in front of the screen doing stuff. You're just like, you know, your mind has the opportunity to wander, and it can happen upon new ideas and new inspirations. So, you know, and maybe not as much running because you're physically exerting yourself, but still, you know, it gives you a chance to get outside, get away from things, and you know, time to reflect a little bit, and it gives you the happiness chemicals afterwards.
I'm not aware of the study, if it's been done, but I'd be interested to look at this data where if they looked at people who are regular long distance runners, like marathon runners, and be interested to see if there is one, what the correlation is between, you know, long distance, like really pretty serious exercise, and depression is. I'm guessing there is a significant inverse relationship there, but I'd like to see it. You know, I think running, and for me, I used to run a lot. I stopped 2 years ago because, as with many things, I go whole hog into it, and I was doing really like pretty heavy stuff, and then I would like run like a maniac, and so I got an overuse injury, and I stopped. But what I do now is I walk twice a day usually, and sometimes if I walk inside, I have a treadmill, so I walk between 5 degrees and 10 degrees, which is fairly steep. And just to be specific, I do that at 4.2 miles an hour, which is fairly quick for walking, and especially when you're on an incline. And, you know, I do 20 minutes of that, and that's enough probably for me, certainly to be a little bit out of breath, and certainly to work up a sweat. And that is very helpful. I would also say something about like distraction. I think if you can find distraction, that's useful. Like something was bothering me the other night, and my wife had mentioned My wife's Korean, by the way, originally, and so we love um, we love Korean dramas and Korean shows and stuff. That's one of the things we do together. And she was saying in one of the new shows that she was watching on her own. I was like, "What do you mean you're watching it on your own? Let's watch it together." And she was telling me about. She's like, "I don't know if you'll like it. It's like it's a gory thriller about serial killers." I'm like, "Well, I'm not really interested in the gore part of it." But then at first I thought no, and then I thought, you know what? It might be a good distraction for me. So it's pretty hard to think about, your own worries when you're like transfixed by the screen and someone's about to get killed or something. It's a good distraction. So I'm not counseling people to spend too much time binge watching Netflix, or certainly not doom scrolling. But sometimes, these sorts of short bursts of this can be a distraction. And I think running probably, there's a biochemical reaction, I'm sure there too, but it's somewhat a distraction. Like I used to race motorcycles and ride motorcycles. And I remember, like, for me, if it was a lot on my mind, I'd go for a ride on my motorcycle because it's so dangerous. I do not recommend this. I'm just giving an example of distraction. If you want to avoid being killed, or certainly try your best to avoid being killed, like hit by a taxi, for example, or a bus, as is often the case in the big city like Tokyo, you have to be 100% focused. You can't be worrying about this thing at work or whatever. So I do think distraction is one of those positive things. So find something to. My dad always said, "You're feeling down, like." Find something to occupy your time, which really means occupy your mind.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, especially nowadays, I have lots of friends that have been laid off and looking for work, and I think that can be, and my dad, when we moved, so originally from South Africa, moved to the States, and then moved up, and then I moved up to Canada, but. My family, we were struggling for a little while in that there was a recession, and my dad's company actually, he got laid off, and then the plant closed, and so he was very stressed for a period of time when we were growing up, and was able to kind of get through it by I think he did some consulting work, and just kept looking for jobs, and same thing for me when I'm running a couple of startups now, and or a startup, and I'm involved in a few other things, and at least I have that to sort of keep me from the constant doom scrolling of like, I'm waiting on hearing from this job application or that job application, and
Right.
definitely
Keep yourself busy.
Keep yourself busy, and keep yourself busy doing something that's either productive or that gives you some form of joy, right? So I mean, I'm actually wearing a shirt that my wife made for me that's on her vinyl cutter, and so she got a vinyl cutter, and then kind of earlier for right before a big conference I was going to, we had a little I put it right to work, and had a little assembly machine going where I made a whole bunch of t-shirts that I then handed out at the conference. and so it was sort of a combination of like making, but the benefits of making something with your hands was actually something that really was rewarding, and I could. And plus, I mean, being the entrepreneur, I was able to say I made this myself, when I'm handing it out to people. So you gotta wear it, you gotta take a picture wearing it, and send me that photo. So
that's very cool.
Yeah.
It's very cool what you said. I think that I'm glomming onto here is that making things with your hands and hobbies, doing things with your hands. So. And it might come back to that connection, like the physical movement, and connect it up through to your brain, which of course, happiness. So we were talking about smiling first, and then that can make you happy. Doing things first can make you happy. You just start. You can intellectualize and say, "Look, I'm not happy. And obviously, if you're severely depressed, that is a completely different thing, and you need to see a professional for that. But I think if you're just feeling kind of, stressed out or got the blues, you may not want to go out and meet people, or you may not want to do anything, but do it anyway. And
Yeah.
by doing it, that helps you. It's kind of like exercise, right? I don't feel like lifting weights tonight. Well, bloody will do it anyway. And the
Yeah.
one thing I found helpful is, whether it's with work, and you and I are often involved in some kind of startups, like, I advise some startups as well. And I've been an entrepreneur myself, but, it's just you don't think, okay, I'm going to do this. And so you kind of, the tendency for a lot of people, myself included, is you think about doing it as the entirety of that. But that is very daunting. It's kind of like the old adage of, how do you eat an elephant? Well, shit, I got to eat this elephant because it's on my KPIs. That's what I have to do this year. I have to eat it. So I'm obsessing about, how the hell am I going to eat the elephant? Well, no, you eat it one bite at a time. Yeah. And so you kind of say to yourself, okay, like running, or I've got to do this task, I'm just going to do it for 1 minute.
Yes.
So I'm very sure that's all I'm going to do. But more often than not, so that makes it very non-daunting, is the science term. And then I found this actually works. It's like, you're just doing it for a minute, and then you're like, okay, I'm into it now, and just keep going. You'll probably do it more than that minute.
Yeah.
Well, and then you develop a habit. But getting over that hump is very, very important. So just say to yourself, like, I know I need to do that task. And you talked about procrastination earlier. And of course, if you continue to procrastinate, that makes you unhappy because you feel guilty about not having done it, or you're worried about a deadline or something you're not doing. So just say to yourself, okay, I'm going to work on it. I'm only going to work on it for a minute. There's an actual name for this. I can't remember. They've done studies on it. Sorry that I don't have that. But I think that these are valuable little hacks, right? Perhaps we should be titling this podcast happiness hacks, that you can, how to hack your own happiness. I don't know. We'll think about that. But let's mention a couple of other things. Does anything else come to mind for you? I know we wrote down a few things here. What does your happiness depend on, or what can be? One of the things, can I add? One of the things about happiness is not just finding things that make you happy. It's avoiding things that make you unhappy.
Exactly.
The negative of that. Yeah. If you find frequently that there's a certain thing that irritates you, and then maybe you whine about it, to your spouse or your family, and then of course that creates more unhappiness because now you're in a fight. It's like, if there's something continually, bothering you, take the time, I would say, to think about it and how you can remove that from your life. And I can't think of an example. I don't know. Can you think of an example? What are things that?
Yeah, just news. So I think
news.
So my wife loves to watch, like, the American news just as a form of entertainment, but it just stresses me out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very dramatic. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's just and I mean, like, less so, but I mean, actually, the one source of entertainment for us in early COVID times were the 1 hour plus news conferenes where a certain leader was telling people to inject bleach and
yeah. You would always.
But I think I've definitely noticed that the less, and social media, the less time you it has been objectively shown that the less time you spend on social media, the better you feel. And why that is because you're comparing your everyday to everyone else's highlight reels, right? So everyone's got these, like, oh, look, I just went to Cabo and I have this beautiful picture, and meanwhile you're toughing it away in the trenches, and in fact that picture was from like 5 weeks ago, and they're
been altered furthermore.
And yes, and now with AI, who knows? But staying off social media and or highly curating it, right? So I'm on Twitter, and what I do is I just make sure that I only follow pathologists, right? So if I only follow pathologists, I don't follow any political stuff, then I curate my algorithm to feed me information that gives me what I need in terms of like networking with scientists and that sort of thing. And and then maybe even have a separate account where I do other things and tailor it towards feeding me what I want to see. Because absolutely, I mean, Facebook was the worst for this, and that anything that generates rage is going to generate, and any clickbaity whatever thing is going to generate more attention, and all of these companies, billions of dollars are funneling into how to get the attention of more and more people, and and that's not and attention is not necessarily healthy. It's just or attention can be hacked, right? Our attention can be hacked by people that know that outrage, is a lot easier to generate than kind of something that puppies that movies of puppies, and so like curating what you're feeding your brain is going to be very beneficial. And
there you go, audience. If you take just one gem from this today,
there you go.
Like go out and watch puppies.
Yeah.
Preferably in the real world while you're walking or jogging.
Yes. I mean, there are literally like puppy. There's like cat cafes, right, where you can go and you can hang out, and there's just a bunch of cats.
I've been to a very nice cat cafe. For some reason, this has taken off a lot in Tokyo. Sorry if I keep bringing this up, but last time for those of you who know Tokyo or have heard of there's an area called Harajuku, or as Americans would say, Harajuku. And it's a very famous street. I remember with my Canadian friend Jeff going there. We were I was working at fintech at the time, and there's a conference there, and he's an investor, an entrepreneur. And I'm like, I'll meet you at Harajuku. We're going to go to Takeshita Dori, which is, it's a Takeshita. And he's like, are you kidding me? You're going to take, and he had the runs at the time because he'd come in from Dubai, and he cuts there, and he had been having problems for weeks. I shouldn't say this. I won't say his last name. And, he's denouncing me for not knowing this. What do you mean? Is this a joke? You're going to take me to take a shit alley? No, it's Takeshita. Anyway, they had a really wonderful see, humor again. They had a really wonderful cat cafe. They've got
and then I think it came up earlier when we were talking about friends, right? There's a saying that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and so I think cutting out negative people from your life is tough to do, but sometimes necessary. I've certainly had to do it a few times where, either it's just the person would be just bringing me down in the dumps every time I spoke to them because, this is going wrong and that's going wrong. Or, I think some of that was therapeutic because I was able to kind of use like my counseling them to get over whatever I was dealing with, but it can't be monosyllabic, right? You need to have a give and take with any given relationship, and in that case it wasn't as much, and then other times there were people that just, for lack of a better phrase, got me into trouble, and spending less time with people that get you into trouble and more time with people that kind of like can feed off of your energy and give you new ideas and or kind of super successful people that have worked a lot of stuff out and have valuable advice to give you. Even, I mean, as you said, grandparents. I wouldn't give to spend more time with my grandparents.
You can for want of a word, kind of do that by proxy, right? Because other people spend time with other people's grandparents.
Exactly.
Sadly, mine will go around. My favorite person in the entire world, this is somebody you should talk about too, Ned Murphy, who is my paternal grandfather in Dublin, and love that guy. And he never had a car his entire life. He walked and took his bicycle everywhere. Irish Catholic, of course. So I think he went to church almost every day. He walked to church. He'd go to church after he walked to the pub. How stereotypically Irish is that? Literally, he had a head of cabbage and boiled his own potatoes and cabbage, from his backyard every single day. So we should talk about food and happiness too.
Yep.
And, all those happiness chemicals, eating well, but having a huge, like everybody knew my grandpa and adored him. And his funeral was massive. Interesting little side note here. So he was born in 1900. And so when he was really, really young, the Irish Republican Army, which morphed into, of course, what many would believe to be a terrorist organization, it's pretty much gone by the wayside now. But in early days, he was a member of the proper Irish Republican Army before it became a terrorist organization, of course. And then when he was really, really young. And so everyone loved him. And when his funeral happened in the cemetery, there were reportedly a couple of IRA, full-on IRA guys in the trees. They wouldn't show themselves in the thing, but just to honor him. I think that's amazing. He was not a terrorist, for those of you idiot enough to comment that he was. But a very, very happy person, drank like a fish, unfortunately, but, lived to 90 and walked a ton and had a ton of friends and ate really well. Boring food, consistent, right? So my brother, who went to live with him there for, I think, about 6 months or so, said it was, he boiled potatoes and boiled cabbage from his backyard garden every single day. Oatmeal for breakfast and stuff like that. But typical Irish stuff. So I think that's, I don't know how we got on that, but sorry. Grandparents, you can go volunteering and charitable work, helping other people and getting, because what you get back from that, you can help them. There's a lot of lonely older people out there naturally. I've been thinking about doing this. And I love talking with everybody. I love talking with kids. Are delightful. My son thinks this is cringy. Like, what do you mean you can't talk to kids? You're older. And people cast aspersions on you, like you're some kind of like nut or something. I think you can talk to people's kids, but children and older people, children you just get delight from, and they say the darndest things. And older people have tons of wisdom. And they may be right. They may be retired, but they've got a lot to say. They can tell you about work and your business. They can tell you about your life. You can there's a new friend. You can adopt a grandpa. There's a big brothers, big sisters. I think they should be big grandpa and big grandma.
Sure.
Maybe we should
Yeah. No, there was this fascinating guy that I met last year, and he runs a psychic shop on the Danforth, and so I was walking by and wandered in, and it was the funniest thing. And then I actually had my entire family come and speak to this guy, because he would read your hand, but he could read you like a fish, and would say things about you that's like, oh yeah, that actually is true. And really, I think what it is he's just super high, super emotionally intelligent, but he was like, he had this whole story of he was a dunce in high school. He wore the big hat, and he's in his 80s, and
a literal dunce cap.
A literal dunce cap back in Saskatchewan, and but he had been in marketing for Rogers or something. He had lived a full life and had done a whole bunch of things, and now he was running this little shop, and
that's awesome.
And it was great, and he would just chat away, and my friends were saying to me, why are we spending time with this guy? I'm like, well, if I can sell an illiterate 80-year-old psychic on what I'm doing, I can sell it to anybody. It's another one of these sort of boning up on my selling skills, and he was.
Were you selling your medical AI consulting service?
Well, not really selling him, but just using it as an experience to. I mean, it was an excuse to just hang out with the guy, because I like to hang out.
Yeah, let's just talk.
But just talk, and I didn't get a lot of work done. And I mean, it was literally.
I'm serious, Trevor. Yeah. Can you take me? Is he still alive?
Oh yeah, no, he's around. Yeah.
Can you take me one day? Because I think
I have his phone number. He doesn't like
Yeah, but I want you to take
the
me because
store closed. Like, I mean, like it wasn't. He needed help with like selling what he did, because he just sat in there and you came in and he read your palm and he wouldn't sell you anything, and he's like,
okay.
oh, there's a smoothie bar over there if you want to get some smoothies. Because it used to be this tiki bar, and then the tiki bar closed, and like this guy kind of set up shop in it, and like he was even telling me how much he paid like in rent a month, and like he was like, I need to do something, and unfortunately I wasn't in the right state to kind of help him at the time, but like it was a interesting opportunity, you know, like, oh, we could like have a comedy set here, and then apparently some guys from the weed store next door had like, you know, talked about doing stand-up comedy in there, but then guess what? The weed guys never followed through.
Surprise, surprise.
The vape store flaked out on some business idea, but
Yeah.
but yeah, like I think, but what I got from him, you know, was just the fact that he was still, you know, he was happy. He was like doing paintings and stuff, and yes, he was worried about, you know, like about making rent and stuff, but like that didn't dissuade him from just doing what he liked to do, you know, and telling really interesting stories, and I mean, I brought my kids to meet him, and then he told them, whether or not it sank in, he would tell them about like how he wasn't always like the best in school, but like he didn't let that bother him, and you know, hopefully some of that sunk in. I don't know, but yeah, like it was just really interesting, and you know, and really interesting to learn from an older person who had a lot of life experience. So, yeah.
Can I pick up on the dunce cap thing? I want to say something about the dunce cap thing.
Sure, yeah.
So, not everyone on this podcast now or in future that listens to this one may be aware of what a dunce cap. Dunce means like idiot, right? Dummy, dunce. I don't know the etymology of that word is, but they used to literally have a hat and it would say dunce on it. And if you said something stupid or got something wrong in class, they would just put you in the corner and you wear the dunce cap. And you were saying something about this fellow wasn't the best in school, but he never let that bother him. But you know, there's this pretty current term now called the snowflake, right? And how people take offense to everything. And of course, you don't want to just be offensive. There is so much to take offense to, people spewing hatred and all other obnoxious things on the internet, of course. But I also think that there is a decline in, to coin a phrase, handleableness. Oh God, that's unwieldy. Like, you know, resiliency to people's negativity, right? Yes. Like when we were kids, like, you know, bullying, and so much about bullying.
Yeah.
You have more avenues for bullying now. But at the same time, I'm thinking about the dunce cap thing. Like someone like that has experienced some negative stuff, but you know, it's not necessarily always a bad thing, is what I'm badly trying to say. Is I think if you have some exposure to those sorts of things, they're kind of like a mini toxin. You build up a resistance to them. The opposite of that, of course, is that if you try in the absence and you shelter, like we're talking about children and young adults here, you helicopter them too much, like as parents we often do today, as opposed to the way I grew up. I don't know about you, Trevor, but like first of all, my parents never did like what I did with my son, who's now 20, like, you know, take them when they're little, they take them to school and do all this. And I was shocked to learn. I don't know what it's like in your audience, listeners, but I was shocked to learn in Toronto, because I thought, like, I went to school. I remember going to school by myself, kindergarten, walking there at 5. And now you are not allowed to let your child walk in the city of Toronto to school by themselves until they are 12. Earlier, if you have an elder sibling, 12, it's ludicrous.
Interesting.
Like,
wow.
Like you're not, they're missing out because of that. And ultimately that's going to weaken them, and that's going to affect their happiness in the future. So it kind of goes back to some of the things we were talking about earlier. And I suggest, like, those things you're worried about, that you think are challenging, do them. Right? I think you get out there, you build up your resistance, you build up your power, you are aware of your power. One of the funny little things I do, audience, that I do think has some small but appreciable difference, makes a difference for me in terms of my happiness, is when I accomplish something even small, I literally
Celebrate it.
pat myself on the back 3 times. That's what I do. I'm like, good job, Rob.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think you gotta push toward these things for your
Yeah,
children.
it's again. Celebrating happiness brings me to kind of the second part of my story about my the worst case disaster scenario generator, right? And so, like, if you're always looking at what's the worst that can happen, that's going to send you down a dark path. But like, there's also kind of the what's the best that can happen, and reality is going to be somewhere in between those two extremes, you know. And so being yes, and part of that is also rewarding small victories. You know, like, okay, I didn't get this done, and the funny thing is actually, I was just telling Rob that I'm using AI for assistance in coding, and like, it's built right into the coding app now, and it's great because it'll help refactor some code that you're working on, but sometimes it can get stuck, you know, but the way that AI is built, it's so sort of sycophantic and really wants kind of to get that approval that it can't handle sort of failure. And so then it was like, well, we didn't get this done, but like, look, we did answer the first question you asked about whether like these numbers,
Which you've already forgotten about by this time, probably.
yeah, exactly. But it's sort of like, you know, but there's something there, which is the fact that, you know, celebrate the small victories, even if you're still grinding out the path to eventual success, you know, and that's certainly something that, you know, kind of company, and that's something that you can incorporate, you know, maybe shifting from kind of personal things to more organizational things that, startups, many different startups have different cultures, and the ones that do well, or you want to be careful about which culture you go into, and that it aligns with like your own style, because I think I've been in places where it was very much kind of like crack the whip and we've got to get this done, and there was never any reward put out for
Terrible.
having done something well, you know,
Yeah.
and even small things, or like, oh, we didn't hit this revenue milestone, and so, you know, but we got pretty close, and so it's a difference in tone, and that's something that you can teach yourself, you know, is your self-talk. You can modify it from, well, I didn't do that, to, well, I was able to achieve this, this, and this, and okay, yes, I didn't get that done, but I mean, I did something else, you know, like for myself, I finally got space to assemble my standing desk in the basement this weekend, even though I didn't get some of the other stuff I wanted to do done, but like, well, I've been trying to do that for multiple years, and
There you go.
did it.
Congrats.
So tap on the back,
A
as you
little
said.
pat on the back for you.
And so don't never be like, the more you can make that a habit of celebrating the small victories, either yourself or as part of whatever team you're a part of. That's a great thing, you know, and that can do wonders for your state of mind and happiness.
It doesn't always have to be in the present. Meaning, it's not just there's a scale thing. It's a big accomplishment I've just done. It can be a little one, and you don't have to have eaten whole elephants, as it were. It doesn't have to just be a very current thing that you've just done that you pat yourself on the back for. You do a celly, as we say in Canada, a celebration. That's a hockey thing, I think. Celebration, celly. But you can remember some of your past accomplishments, right?
Sure.
And replay them in your mind.
Yes,
And
yes. Again, part of the depressive view or the anxious view of the world is to sort of see like, oh, I'm a failure, all of this, and absolutely, you know, like, again, reframing that mindset from one of like obsessing on the negatives to obsessing on the positives. Like, I had a brilliant friend of mine who had this mental model of voles. So like is what he called them. They were like the voices in his head, and for lack of a better phrase. And so he had this internal dialogue always going on inside his brain, of like different, which I think is a way of sort of characterizing kind of like how you think, and how he thought at least. And you can imagine, just as if it were an external audience, there's an internal audience that your mind is speaking to, and you want to be careful what words that your mind uses. If your mind is continually saying, I'm a failure, I'm a failure, I'm a failure, well, that's going to sort of self-reinforce. Whereas if your mind can say, well, there's these things, maybe there's these things that I've got to work on, is better than I'm a failure. But better than that even is like, I've been successful in the past, I'm going to be successful in the future, and this is only a temporary roadblock,
Right.
The extent to which you can change your beliefs about what, challenges you're facing, from being these permanent, impenetrable barriers to being something that's temporary and something that you can overcome, is going to reinforce that resilience that you're going to need to get through, the next phase of whatever you're doing. And, everyone talks about like how, my job is difficult. Like the thing to think about is that all jobs are difficult, right? There's always going to be challenges in your life, no matter what you're doing, there's always going to be challenges that you're going to be facing. And the mindset that you take when you face those challenges is going to have a big effect on how you can eventually overcome them, right?
I think you recognize there's always going to be challenges. You can look at that as a negative or a positive, because who would want to live in a world where there are no challenges? I wouldn't. We would just be on our backs. Yeah, and we might be smart. Maybe we're smart. I don't think so. I think we'd be on.
It's the Wall-E.
Yes,
world.
It's the Wall-E kind of mentality.
I mean, like they've done that social experiment of like there were rats that were put in this maze where like everything was given to them, and there were no limitations in terms of what happened, and eventually that the entire society collapsed, because like there was it's not necessarily a healthy thing to just be spoon-fed things your whole life.
No, it's not. I was going to add a couple of things onto what you're saying. Your attitude, and the person you believe most. I would love to look this up after the fact, or maybe one of the commenters who reads this, if they know something about this or can find out something about this. It seems to me that long ago that I'd love to see some scientific evidence around the veracity of this, but that the person that we believe more than anybody is ourselves. And so what that means is in exactly to what your point was before, that we need to be careful about what words we say, because we believe what we say about ourselves. Like if you say I'm stupid, or I'm a failure, or I'm whatever, I can never do this. Well, it becomes a self-fulfilling, self-reinforcing prophecy, or those words it goes right into our brains. Right. Yeah. Others we often tend to be very skeptical of, right? We pride ourselves on this, but we don't filter ourselves enough. Yeah. And so I strongly suggest, yes, you really take it seriously what you say yourself. It bothers me if I on occasion my son has said, "Oh, I'm an idiot," or whatever. Like all of us have said this, but don't say that, and have a growth mindset. Oh, I'm not good at this, and like I can never do math. Well, I think all of us can improve. I think we're realistic, but I think your attitude, what you say to yourself, how it's self-inculcation. It's almost like your own religion, right? It's your own operating system. Yep. We have to be very careful. And I think, again, on the attitude thing, I was going to say, celebrating small things rather than just like, okay, unless I hit it out of the park, I'm no good. That's nonsense, right? And it's only going to deplete your energy. And keeping your energy high is very important for your happiness, right? Yeah. All the things that you can do for your energy, like the people you surround yourself with, right? You want to surround yourself with people that care or positive, like cultivating an optimistic attitude. In part, that is who you hang out with, what they say, what you say to yourself, what food you ingest, right? If you're eating processed foods that like bad microbes, like on the last podcast, I was wearing a Nirvana shirt, and I think I referenced this. I'll reference it again, but you know, I would love to think that somebody like Kurt Cobain, who suffered from, pretty severe depression to the point, of course, where he died by suicide, but for those of you who know him beyond just the music, or about him beyond just the music, his favorite foods were terrible, like drinking pop and or soda, as the Americans would say, and craft dinner and that kind of garbage, right? And that just feeds the bad bacteria where all the good happiness chemicals. So you got to feed yourself well, like
feed your mind and your body well. Absolutely.
Yeah, if you can grow cabbage and your potatoes in your backyard and have that every day, that's all, I think, good stuff. I don't know about the potatoes so much, but certainly the cabbages, and certainly the Guinness and the whiskey. No, forget that part of him. But all getting out and putting yourself in front of people, making friends, and being a decent. I remember, like, he would come over from Dublin when I was a kid, and I always loved it. And like, I remember he's such a generous person. Like, I clearly remember passing somebody. It was funny. You remember as a kid, I was really small, and down at Harbourfront, Queens Quay there in Toronto, I remember passing some fellow who was like begging for money, and I think he had a violin or something. And of course, my granddad gave him something. So helping other people, it doesn't have to be money, but you can, please do give. If you're stinking rich, please give some of it, and not just to your family, because that's not really giving, is it?
Well, and it can be give your time, right? If you don't have
give your
money,
time, give your
time,
time.
you can volunteer.
Yeah,
like I volunteer with my kids' scout troop, and it's fantastic.
Really?
I get to as some of the other volunteers say, it's the like 2 hours of the week where they're not in front of a screen, and but we get to do all sorts of fun stuff. And like, like the plan for the troop is sometimes, well, like, what do you want to do that's fun? Let's turn that into a into a meeting kind of thing. So so I think it's definitely give of yourself or your time, or donate. My grandfather used to say, had this saying that I think I used to, I used to feel sad that I had no shoes until I saw a man who had no feet. And so there's lots
put it in perspective.
It gives absolute perspective on, and he grew up very difficult, and he grew up orphaned, and he was a very successful entrepreneur, and but he always had that in his mind, and in his will, he donated to a lot of different. He and his sister both donated to a lot of different like organizations, orphanages, and all of that sort of thing, because they knew where they came from, kind of thing. And
terrific.
And I think it pays well. And I mean, like, one example that we can point to, even in Toronto, I think I heard on the news the other night, coming back from a scout thing, that the food bank, right? The food bank of Toronto is going to be experiencing the most visits this year ever, like 4 million individual client visits this year. So if you even if you've got some spare non-perishable goods, some cans of whatever that you're not using, bring it to a local, I think it's just a local fire hall or something, and they'll make sure it gets to the food bank. So I think it's definitely, there's happiness in helping your fellow man.
100%, because we're, it sounds cliche, but I think there is real truth in this. I mean, we're all connected, right? We're all on this earth together, and we're all human. And it doesn't mean you have to invite these people always into your home and befriend them, but you can give and help your fellow human, even if you don't always agree with them. We won't get political, not now, at least, but I was very impressed by the widow of this fellow who was assassinated in the U.S. recently, right? And so there's a lot of acrimony and division there because people, may really agree with his message, and some people who conversely really disagree. And so there's a lot of division, and some people are calling for violence and all these terrible things. Like, can we take the temperature down? But the widow, you'll know who I'm talking about. She came out after, like, within a week, I think, of him being assassinated. So I forgive him. Wow, like that just blew me away. And they're they happen to be Christian people. I'm not a religious person at all, but like I respect that. And I think you're being true to your belief of the Christian belief. I grew up Catholic, go figure with my name. But you're supposed to, like that man, whether you believe he was, the Messiah or, the uh, God or not. I think most people would agree that he's a historical figure and was a very good person. And so, forgiveness was at the heart of that. And so for her to do that and follow through on her beliefs and, clearly prove that, she's more than just a,
And there's something to learn from that for whatever you're involved in. Like I
yeah,
had,
like we've all encountered really like terrible people in our lives, and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
hard to forgive. But like that would be the hardest thing. Like if somebody killed my spouse,
Mm, mm,
I, I don't think I could forgive that. Like no,
yeah.
but good for her. So, but I see the value in that.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I mean, like, I think there's this phrase, right? Holding a grudge is just letting someone live rent free in your head. So,
yeah, 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 yeah.
so there is the concept that rather than obsessing over someone that did you wrong, to sort of let it go. And I mean, it's incredible that, yeah, as you say, she was able to do that. And but I think there's a general thought there that just being able to move on from a tragic
Yeah.
event, or being able to forgive someone who's wronged you, and come back to some semblance of normality. There's a process, right? There's kind of a healing process involved there, and that process is dependent on your buy-in. So to the extent that you can, like in your own time, even make a. I think I had a friend who I was giving advice to, and I figured that advice actually worked well for me as well. Was like, write them a letter, and get everything out on the page of get all that negativity out of your head onto a page, and then light that page on fire, and just burn it away, and that
That's a
way,
good idea.
like just purge yourself, use an exercise to purge yourself of that negativity, because otherwise it's just going to eat you up inside, and it's not going to be
Yes.
healthy. So.
You're taking the poison that you wish they had taken. Really, you're only poisoning yourself, right? So why go there either way?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So interesting. Well, I mean, did you have anything else more to add, or
I think we had a few more things on the thing, but I think they could, food and happiness, and relationships and happiness. That could be a whole other podcast.
yeah? And I might
Dive into.
add one thing, or maybe allude to it, that we will elaborate on in a future episode. But that is, because we don't want to seem all kind of, what's the word, like Pollyanna or proselytizing and of this and that, and goody goody good two shoes, because we all like the odd luxury, right? Some of us more than others. It doesn't have to be that $250 million yacht that billionaire who casts aspersions on my seeking happiness thing has. But are there indulgences that you have that really make you kind of give you a little squirt of happiness, chemicals, if you will? Like, is there something that you like to do? Would you splurge on something, or a luxury, or I don't know. I don't remember seeing you with a Gucci handbag or anything like that. Man bag. Shout out to my lovely wife who does love Gucci handbags.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, you know what I love to do is baking. So like we have extra bananas left over that are going bad, and make some banana bread out of it. And it's just something that's it's simple, it's productive, and it gives me something to feed my family at the end of the day, or like, banana bread for the week for kids snacks and stuff. So I think that's really something that I enjoy, that again, gets me up off the screen, and doing something. So,
Yeah. For me, I'd say the things that I really like to do, I love to travel when I can. The problem is, for so many of us, it's either, okay, you have the time but not the money, or you have the money but not the time.
Right.
Having those two overlap is very important. And then, of course, if you're anything like me, having the person available to go with. So I was super happy going back to Paris in November with my wife, and then my good friend who used to be in my band years ago in Tokyo. I'm like, he's in London. I'm like, hey, do you want to go to Paris? I'm going to be here then. And he's like, I love Paris. I'll be there.
Awesome.
So, those sorts of things are terrific. Those are experiences. But I love
experiences more than objects, I would say.
Yeah, not so much objects.
If you're going to spend, I mean, the best time my family has had in recent past was my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. They brought us all on a Disney cruise, and it was just fantastic, because like there were I have 3 kids, so there were like 3 levels of youth kind of activity places that the 3 kids could all go to. And one of them showed up at like midnight with two cones of ice cream that he got from the
That's just like kids would go gaga for that, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So, but we were very lucky that that we were able to do that. But it was truly an experience, and then we got a couple days of downtime afterwards, just hanging out with them in their place in Florida, and it was. So it really was amazing, and I think it's high up on my list of as soon as things do start to kick off again for my company, that the next thing I want to do is do that again, and
cruise.
Go on a cruise with bring my parents to kind of repay the fact that they took us that time. So
and you're gonna bring the kids.
Oh yeah.
I like to say, for people who don't have children and wonder what it's like you just made me realize this, because I'm sure your kids were like this on that thing. Having kids is like having a bunch of drunken midgets around. So I don't have any drunken midget friends, and I know that's not the term, it's little people. But I don't know, I kind of think that's a pretty good analogy for little kids. Sometimes, at least the ones that are related to me.
Their frontal lobes have not fully matured. Yes.
And
the frontal lobe is the first to turn off when you're drunk. So absolutely.
And maybe we can kind of segue out of this episode on that note. It's like, remember how to do things that make you feel like a little kid. Like I was the other day, I went to Winners, and so for our American friends, and there's like TJ Maxx. I don't know what it'd be elsewhere, but anyway. I was in Winners and with my wife, and I was trying something on, and I was in the change room, and I'm like, I heard some music, and I'm like, I just started bopping away. I was like a little kid being a maniac, like in my case. It's like, I think you need to have those moments and allow yourself those moments.
And like remember what you were like as a kid, and remember what made you laugh or have fun as a kid, and don't be afraid to do a bit more of that, absolutely. I think very much looking at the world with childlike wonder, as opposed to kind of cynical,
Yes. Let's end the cynicism right now. Yeah. Giggle. We start the giggle party, the giggle political party. Our whole policy is all directed towards making people giggle.
Making people laugh. I love it.
That's awesome. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We hope to see you in future episodes. High Octane Friends. And again, that's I'm Rob McMullan and Trevor McKee, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. We'll be having some guests come up, so look forward to that. Thank you so much. Stay happy.
Yes, absolutely.